profits. If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.
Good evening and welcome to episode 38 of Horsin Around right here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your very proud host, Howard Kravitz. Thank you for joining us on what is going to be quite the special night. I don't know if anyone's heard as we're filming this Monday night, but we broke a little news, not a little news, big news about Torpedo Anna. We had articles in the Daily Racing Forum and Horse Racing Nation regarding our interview and with Kenny McPeek and information that we broke right here on the HHH Racing Podcast about Torpedo Anna. We'll be talking to Kenny McPeek tonight, and also we will have the owner of Fierceness of Repole Stables, Mike Repole. This is the first time that we're having both of them on our airwaves in the history of this podcast. We are very excited about that. We're going to talk about promotions and many other things in between the Mike Repole interview and the Kenny McPeek interview. We're going to actually show the Mike Repole interview first. And the whole purpose of doing all this tonight is to have answered two major questions. And that is, who should be the 2024 Horse of the Year and who should be the 2024 3-year-old Male of the Year. And to help me with this discussion will be my trusty co-host. First, from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Saratoga Special, Mr. Paul Halloran, and from the East Coast of Maryland, Pete Visco. Guys, big night tonight. How are we doing today?
Fantastic. What's up, gentlemen?
Good evening, Pete.
Good evening, Paul.
Guys, they're doing great. Look, I'm very excited to share this with you. And let me just say a few quick things, and we're going to jump right into the Mike Repole interview here in just a few minutes. First of all, full disclosure, both these interviews are taped. Neither one of them could join us live tonight. I don't want to deceive our audience. So we taped the Mike Repole interview Friday, and we taped the Ken McPeek interview Sunday morning. However, that should absolutely not dissuade anyone in our live chat on commenting, because what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we are going to stop the interviews once in a while to let Pete and Paul comment on what Mike Repole and Ken McPeek said. And we absolutely want your opinions, big time. If you're watching us on X right now, please jump over to our YouTube channel so you can join what should be an extremely active live chat. And there's already a ton of people there, like Paul Conlon, Matt Miller, Katie is here. I see Terry Frank is here. It's like, congrats on the scoop. Thank you, Terry. Greatly appreciate that. Rodney is here. Oh boy, Rodney's be coming in hot with his opinions. Can't wait for this show. Rodney, thanks for joining the show. Got Nathan Woodward is here. We got a lot of people here, guys. Sean Kane is here. So we're very excited to have a lot of people in the chat. We want to be active. So guys, let's go and get started. Let me talk first. Let me show everyone some statistics. And Pete and Paul, I want to get your very, very, very quick opinion on what you guys see on the screen here coming up. Again, we're discussing Horse of the Year and also 3-year-old Male of the Year. The nominations or the finalists have not been, I repeat, have not been announced yet. Paul is actually a voter for the Eclipse Awards this year, but I think we have the final 3 correct for a Horse of the Year. So let's go and show them on the screen here. Guys, your quick opinions as you see Torpedo Anna, Fierceness, and Sierra Leone. They all have fantastic resumes for Horse of the Year. Paul, your very quick thoughts, snapshot as you see this on the screen.
I think you have them in the correct order, left to right.
Interesting. Okay. Torpedo Anna 6 for 7, 5 grade 1s, which Pete towers over Fierceness's and Sierra Leone's grade 1s. You can argue the quality of those races. I mean, she was mainly against females this year, but she was 6 for 7, Pete, won 3.6 million, basically did everything right all year long. And as I talked to Paul about with Kenny McPeek, you could hardly call her loss to Fierce's by half a length, a blemish on her record.
No, not at all. Although when I look at this screen, I think it doesn't scream to me Horse of the Year candidates. So that we could talk about later when we get into it in a little more detail, but that's more my opinion on the candidates that we will be discussing tonight.
So in general, you just don't think this is an extremely strong crop there's no one really stands out in your opinion, Pete? Is that right?
No, I don't think any of them had true Horse of the Year candidacies, in my opinion, if it
Really?
was a year where there was more of a standout to compete against them. But I think, the year is what it is, and somebody has to get it in the end.
Paul, I think I have a pretty good feeling who's going to win Horse of the Year. We'll see. I would assume 3-year-old male has got to be between Fierce and Sierra Leone. And I really think you can make a strong argument for either one, at least in my opinion.
I agree. I think that's much closer. I agree with Pete to a degree, but it's you can only take what's in front of you, right? It's like when you have a mediocre 3-year-old crop, someone's got to win the Derby, and they get the same color roses, red. So my feeling is that the gap between first and second in Horse of the Year will be much closer. Will be not as close as the gap with first and second and 3-year-old male. But it's hard to predict how. Remember, there were some people who thought Horse of the Year was going to be close last year. I wasn't one of them, but it was a total, romp. It was like 140 something points to 37. I don't think you're going to see that this year in either one of them.
Pete, I think the big
go ahead.
Well, I think the big question, Pete, and we're going to hear from Mike Repole and Kenny McPeek about this, is how much do you value the Classic? Because obviously Sierra Leone beat Fierceness. They were actually 2-2 head-to-head. They raced each other against each other 4 times in 2024. They each won twice. I guess the question is, do you give more value to a particular race that one of them won, i.e. the Classic, for example?
I think you can. I think some people will. I think, though, there's also a lot of people who think Fierceness ran the best race in the Classic, and everything was against Fierceness, and Sierra Leone had a fantastic setup, and that's what got him the win. So if that's your opinion, I'm not saying it's mine or any of ours or how we think necessarily, but if that's your opinion, you might even give that to Fierceness, even though he lost the race. And then don't forget, Sierra Leone didn't win the other two, didn't win 2.
Correct.
He actually just finished ahead of Fierceness in 2 of them. So that you take into account as well. That's why I think I think you could split hairs between Fierceness and Sierra Leone, and I'm sure we'll get to that. I assume we're all going to be picking at some point and give some reasoning behind it. So
sure. I think I know someone who's going to be on this show that feels like Fierceness should be 3-year-old male of the year. I wonder who that could possibly be.
Yeah.
Or not. Maybe he'll have some surprising thoughts. All right, guys. Let's not waste any more time here. I'm going to bring on Mike Repole. Again, these are taped interviews, ladies and gentlemen, but we really want you to be active in the live chat, especially. And obviously, if you're watching this as a replay, we'd love to hear your opinions below the video player on YouTube once this goes up on YouTube, which will be shortly after our live show here Monday night. We're also going to go a little bit longer. Usually try to go for about an hour. This show's going to be more about an hour 15 based on how long the interviews are. And this is a very hot topic. And I think we're going to get a lot of viewership tonight with a lot of interest as well. Before I start the Mike Repole interview, guys, I just want to say one thing. Mike Repole is very outspoken. He's very strong with his words. But I'll tell you what, he is absolutely good for this game. Now, people can think he's obnoxious. Some people hate him. Some people love him. He does a lot for aftercare, guys, which I am automatically a huge fan of right off the top. He's willing to spend his money, Pete and Paul. He puts his money where his mouth is, and he cares very much about horse racing, and in particular, New York horse racing. So, again, he has the detractors. I'm sure we'll hear them in the live chat tonight. But, guys, in general, I think he's very good for the game. Pete, I know you agree.
Yeah, I'm a Repole guy. He's a northeastern Italian guy.
There you go.
Who likes to say the F word a bunch. Not in this interview potentially, but in general conversation. So he's sort of right up my alley. But somebody has to speak up, and even when you don't agree, sometimes it's nice to get the conversations going. And he has a knack for getting conversations going one way or the other, where the people disagree or agree with him. So that's not a bad thing. Yes, and he has a little bit of cash and cachet and weight to actually makes potentially some things happen more than just the regular Joe like us who bitch and moan on X and podcasts and everywhere else. He actually has himself in position to make some changes, or at least circle the wagons to potentially make some changes.
And Paul, his main trainer, is one of the classiest guys in horse racing, and Todd Pletcher. I respect an owner that uses Todd mainly as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, you'll hear when we talk to Kenny and Mike's name came up. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Howard. Some people love him, some people hate him. If you don't think he's good for the game, you're wrong. That's just simply a wrong opinion. And it's a free country, and everyone has the right to be wrong. But he certainly, to a degree, that brashness is good for the game.
I agree.
We can go on and talk about characters in our game. We talked a few weeks ago, love them or hate them. The Kentucky Derby is going to be more interesting this year than it was the last 2 years or 3 years, isn't it?
No doubt about it. We have some great comments, below the video player. Again, if you're listening to this later, go watch the show on YouTube and you can see some of the comments we're talking about. All right, guys, let's start. So again, this is a taped interview. The interview is about 22 minutes of Mike Repole. This is just myself and Mike Repole. And the cool part, ladies and gentlemen, is Paul and Pete have not seen 1 second of this video. You're going to get real time reaction from Pete and Paul because I'm the only one that interviewed or was part of the interview with Mike Repole. So let's bring it on the screen. We're going to interrupt the video in certain spots. Please enjoy the interview here with Mike Repole, and please comment in the live chat if you're watching us live here on YouTube. So let me go and bring them on right now, guys. Hopefully the sound will be wonderful and everything should work great. Let's see. And here we go. The interview with Mr. Mike Repole. And now let's bring on one of the most prominent owners in the history of horse racing. We are very proud here on the HHH Racing Podcast to have on Mr. Mike Repole. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Good, Howard. Thanks. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Mike, we are, of course, here to talk about Horse of the Year conversation. As you are very well aware, that the nominations or the finals haven't come out yet, but we are assuming here on the podcast that Fiercest will be one of those 3 finalists. My first question for you, Mike, and again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. How's Fiercest doing? As most people know, he had a little surgery. How's he doing? How's he coming along?
Yeah, I mean, the best word was a little surgery. He was out for about 15 minutes. It was a hind leg. He's doing fine. He's in Kentucky. I think he's at Windstar. And after the new year, he'll probably go to Stone Street in Ocala for 30 days and then back off to Todd March 1st, maybe. And Mind Frame, by the way, is at Stone Street right now. He worked today. He's going to be at Todd probably this week. So pretty exciting to have those 2 4-year-olds coming back next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you wanted to probably go to some big races overseas in the Middle East, but Fiercest will definitely have his day in 2025. Really talented. Congratulations on the year that he had. Let's go ahead and show some highlights of Fiercest in 2024, and obviously we want to hear your opinion and why this horse should be Horse of the Year and his credentials. Let's go ahead and bring it on the screen right now, Mike. You can see here, this is Equibase, of course. Really good year. 6 starts, 3 firsts, a second and a third. How about 2.7 million in earnings for one of the best trainers in the history of the game, as far as I'm concerned, Todd Pletcher? If you could, rate his year in general, maybe scale 1 to 10, or I'm actually a math teacher, Mike, my real profession. So if you want to give him a grade, or how do you feel about Fiercest's year in 2024?
I think if I'm gonna judge it unbiasedly, I think he's got a 90. I think listen, you won 50% of your races. You won the Florida Derby, the Jim Dandy, and the Travers. He had one really, really bad start, which was the Kentucky Derby, and sort of 19 other horses. And then he, the fountain, not the Fountain of Youth, but the what's the race? God, I can't even think of it.
The Holy Bull.
The Holy Bull. I think that race was better than people gave it credit for. He was coming off a layoff after the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he got hit pretty bad at the starting gate, went super wide, fought, got to the lead, and then got third by probably less than 2 lengths, with 3 lengths, and then he came back, and honestly, I think in one of the best 3-year-old Grade 1 performances, winning the Florida Derby by 14 lengths. he showed his greatness. 110 buyer. Honestly, it was one of the most like just looking at it like top of the stretch, watching him just extend the field, made himself a pretty heavy Derby favorite going into the race. And listen, the Derby is has defeated 95% of its opponents every year. There's only one winner, and many times the horse that wins the Derby doesn't come back and win too many races. This doesn't happen a lot. It's an anomaly race, Howard. How many horses in the United States are 20 horse fields? Okay, one. How many times does a jockey run in a 2-turn 20 horse field? Never, except for the Derby. And how many times are there 160,000 fans in the crowd for a race? So there's so much, and you can get post 19 or post 1, and it's just, I don't think it's it's a race that everybody wants to win, but it's a really tough race, and you could run it 10 times and probably get 10 different winners every year.
Look,
So
yeah, I mean, like I said, we're going to interrupt the video once in a while. What grade, Paul? Is that fair? A minus for fierceness for 2024, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say right on target, and he couldn't be more right than about the Derby. I feel that. I mean, we love it. It's a great spectacle, but let me remind you that Rich Strike won the Kentucky Derby. It doesn't mean a great horse can't win it. It means you don't have to be great to win it. And he just had a bad day. And I think when you look at him on paper, Howard, and what he did after the Derby, it looks pretty good. So yeah, I think 90 is very fair.
Pete, real quick, your thoughts on a grade? Do you think that's fair, an A minus or 90%, as Michael said?
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. I agree with everything Paul said. So, and to me, the Derby is one of the least important data points when looking at a year for a horse, only because I think it is a crapshoot. I don't think it really reflects necessarily on how a horse does. It's a lot more circumstance than many of the other races.
If I could, I would. I think that grade is fine. If I were to really be picky, and I am a teacher by trade, I'm not sure I can give anyone an A who ran that bad as the favorite in the biggest race of the year. I would say B plus. Again, we're splitting hairs, but if everyone believes the biggest race of the year is the Derby and he completely flopped, I don't know. I'd love to hear people's opinion. We have a lot more to say, but I don't need a response from you guys necessarily. That's just my opinion there. Again, people feel free. What grade would you give Fierceness in the live chat? Okay, let's go back to the Mike Repole interview. I mean, there's a lot of really good horses in the history of horse racing, Mike, that have lost the Kentucky Derby. Yeah, that's for sure. He went on to Saratoga. I mean, was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to show the stretch run of the Travers. I'm sure you don't mind seeing that.
No,
again,
that
he won the Jim Dandy.
The Jim Dandy or the Travers I can watch all day. But I came back and won the Jim Dandy, beat Sierra Leone when Sierra Leone was the favorite, and then in my opinion, being unbiased, I gave him a 90. I really believe that this was the race of the year in horse racing. You had the filly and the colt, and everybody was talking about this. You had Dornoch, the Belmont winner, Sierra Leone, and Torpedo Anna. And, right here, when Fiercest goes for the lead right here, you're feeling really, really good. And the filly, I give, McPeek and their connections so much credit. I mean, I went to the winner's circle and I gave McPeek and the connections. The biggest compliment I can give them is, just please, please, please keep her with the fillies. I don't want to race against her anymore. And he held her off, and it looks like, maybe another 10 yards she catches it. But if you went through the gallop out, she never really passed him. Fierceness, when she got to him, kind of geared down. But really, my opinion is you just saw the best 3-year-old filly and the best 3-year-old colt in the country in this race. And even though we lost the Breeders' Cup Classic, to me, these are the two best horse races, and 3-year-olds. And, the race for horse of the year, to me, should be between them two. And if you want me to be totally unbiased, 3-year-old colt, in my opinion, there's not even a question. If you're going to go by one race, then why even look at the whole body of work? Fierceness deserves to be the 3-year-old colt. He's brilliant. He's spectacular. He beat Torpedo Anna, who only lost once this year. And in the, in the classic, while the other two horses in that speed duel ended up last and second last, he has a horse that fought the entire way and came back when Sierra Leone passed him at top of the stretch and ran a huge number. And you can't go 22, 45, 109 and win too much. And Sierra Leone was the definite deserving winner that day on the circumstance and the pace. I don't think that makes him the 3-year-old colt of the year, but it does make him the Breeders' Cup Classic winner. And sometimes the best horse in the race wins, and sometimes he doesn't. And pace makes it where to go. I mean, they also raced, in the Jim Dandy. Sierra Leone was second. They raced in the Travers, and people forget that Sierra Leone was in the race because it was really Torpedo Anna and Fierceness. But the horse that was way back in third was Sierra Leone. And then this race, we were second to him, and he's a great horse. And I think he's, the second best 3-year-old colt, and there's nothing to frown upon. And I think that was the first race Sierra Leone won since before the Derby. So I think he was going like 6-7 months without a win, and he won the Classic. And good horse.
Yeah. I don't think it's a surprise that he thinks Fierceness should get 3-year-old of the year, guys. I don't think it's nearly as definitive as he's saying, if that's how it ends up being, Pete, in the voting.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mike on this one. So for some people on this show and some people in the chat who know this, and we've had a vested interest in Sierra Leone in the Kentucky Derby, wouldn't you say that up through the Classic, up through from Sierra Leone's win in the Bluegrass through the Classic, Sierra Leone was a little more disappointing? It's really hard to say a horse that was disappointing for a majority of their season all of a sudden becomes horse of the year or 3-year-old of the year. That's the way I look at it. Again, that's just my opinion. This is all opinion like anything else. So to me, I look at it and say, I agree from that perspective. I think as far as 3-year-old males go, Fierceness's accomplishments to me are better than Sierra Leone's. And I don't even think, it's not even a question to me in my mind. Just for me, I wouldn't even think twice about it.
Wow. Paul, does it matter? Let's go off the premise that Fierceness actually ran the better race in the Classic, which I think many people would agree, but maybe some people wouldn't. Should that matter? Who runs the better race? The bottom line is Sierra Leone won the damn thing. So what's your opinion on that in general, in totality?
Yeah, I think everything matters if you're talking about, trying to split hairs with two horses that are presumably close. I think it matters. And, again, if we're talking about circumstances in the race, Sierra Leone won a race in April, and then he won a race again in November. And in the race in November, got an absolute setup. The Classic melted down. To Mike's point, he makes a good point. Fierceness was on the pace and stayed there. Now, Sierra Leone, to his credit, is good enough to win a race like that when he gets circumstances like that. But when he did not get circumstances like that, he lost the Travers, lost the Jim Dandy, lost the Belmont, and unfortunately, I heard he lost the Kentucky Derby.
Unfortunately, yeah. Look, I don't want to keep stopping it too much, but I thought that was a good place to stop. I will give my opinion here coming up right on the video because Mike just flat out asked me. I admit that I'm a Sierra Leone fan. That doesn't mean I have blinders on, guys, because I think I said right to you, Paul, or someone in our group immediately after the Classic. I came down for I was watching the race. I said Fierceness just ran unbelievably. I think I said it immediately. I mean, look, so take absolutely nothing away from Fierceness in the Classic. He ran huge. All right, let's go ahead and keep listening. Again, this is the HHH Racing Podcast. This is our interview with Mike Repole that occurred this past Friday. Yeah, well, look, two great horses, and I'm a big fan of Sierra Leone. Actually, I hope you don't mind me saying it, we actually had a big future Derby bet on Sierra Leone on this podcast, which was sort of made famous on X and other places, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah,
and I obviously I knew that your horse could be a big factor. And look, everyone just has a bad day, just happened to be at the Kentucky Derby. But Mike, you brought up a lot of good points, and I want to get to the heart of the matter of this conversation. Again, the points and topics for me on the bottom of the screen as well for our people that are watching. This is the big question to me. What should the criteria be to win Horse of the Year? Now, we have someone on our one of our co-hosts who's not here. He's actually part of our show tonight, but he's not as part of this conversation right now as we're taping this, ladies and gentlemen, Friday, a few days before our live show here tonight on Monday. He is an Eclipse voter as well, and it's a tough call. The only real thing that a horse has run once in the United States. That's it. So to me, this is like MVP, right, Mike, for baseball, whatever. Is it the fastest horse? Is it the horse that has the most grade ones? Is it the horse that has the most earnings? Is it the horse that's won the most important races? How do you unbiasedly tell your opinion on how you determine who should get Horse of the Year?
I think it really, I mean, listen, to me, it's open to every single category: colt, filly, sprinter, turf, dirt, distance, you name it. And I really think it's got to be the horse that, really that not only won the biggest races, but also was the horse that people talked about the entire year. Not a horse that just won one race, and a horse that really just, when you talk about the novice fan and the professional fan, this is a horse they want to talk about, and this is a horse that they want to pay to go see and get excited about, and then that horse has to back it up with performance.
Capture the heart of the. I mean, we do have a Vox,
yeah. I mean,
popular,
it's horse of the year.
Populi. Yeah,
it's horse of the year, and I'm going to tell you right now that, and this is completely unbiased, the horse of the year is Torpedo Anna. The horse of the year is Torpedo Anna. We'll get nominated. We should be second. And even though we beat her, she was valiant in defeat versus us. And she ran an incredible race. And if it wasn't for fierceness, she wins the race by 2 or 3 lengths.
Wow. How about that? Look, that I have a lot of respect for Mike, because he didn't have to say that. I'm sure he fully believes that. That's quite a statement coming from Mike Repole, Pete.
Yeah, I didn't. You don't necessarily expect someone to say that, but if you listen to his criteria, it leads to Torpedo Anna for the most part. So he was actually almost, if he would have said all that and then said fierceness, he would have sort of contradicted himself. And I don't think he necessarily would want to do that. So I agree with his logic, and I most likely agree with his actual choice. And I know Paul does as well. What do you think, Paul?
A lot of great comments in the chat, by the way, Paul. People tipping their cap to Mike Repole for saying that and believing it too, of course.
Yeah, well, I think you have to remember that, because, sooner or later, maybe sooner, he's going to say something you vehemently disagree with, but understand that, there's some credibility there, because, I think if you had asked, if you did a poll, Howard, with all the people in the chat ahead of time and said, how many think he's going to say fierceness for the Horse of the Year, I bet half or more than half would have said yes, fierceness. So, I happen to share that opinion, so I'm going to assume it's right. I think it is. That's why I think when he says fierceness for 3-year-old colt, that opinion's just as valid as Torpedo Anna. But again, it's all opinion, and the opinions that matter are those who vote. But I certainly think that's how it's going to come down.
All right, let's continue with the Mike Repole.
Hey, wait, Howard, real quick, for education for myself in a way, and everybody in the chat and stuff. Paul, who all votes? I know some people may know, some people may not know. Who are the voters, and what's the body? Is it just writers? Is it media? Is it other people in racing? Who actually makes up the voting body?
There are 3 blocks, Pete. I want to try to get this right.
I've got it in front of me, Paul, in case you can't find it.
It's Daily Racing Form is one block. The National Turf Riders is another block. And is it the Jockey Club, Howard?
No, it's the NTRA, Paul.
NTRA, I'm sorry. So there's 3 voting blocks, Pete. The Form, the Writers and Broadcasters, and then the NTRA.
It's been around since 1971, which is a great year, Pete, because this is the year I was born. So, you know.
Me
hey.
too. Me too. Fantastic
There you go, man.
year.
There you go.
Fantastic year.
Can I give the finger on YouTube? No, I better not. It's a
Paul was
classy show
19.
tonight.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well,
All right, let's go back.
1871, 1971, 1971. We got to.
No,
We all,
Pete, I'm like the room at the dining room at Saratoga, the 1863 club.
1863 club.
All right, that's a great question, Pete. I'm glad you asked that. Let's go ahead and back to the interview, guys. Here we go.
So if we win the Classic, I think winning the Classic and beating her, we become Horse of the Year. I think when we lost the Classic, we lost Horse of the Year to a horse we beat. And this horse only had one loss, and it was to Fierceness. And, you know, if I had a vote, I'm voting for the Peter Anna for Horse of the Year. It's not even, I can't even make a case for Fierceness. Just
wow, I appreciate your thoughts. I mean, a lot of people are gonna look the males. I have some stats, Mike. The Eclipse Award's been around since 1971, which is, by the way, my birth year. So good year to start the Eclipse Awards. There have been 17 3-year-old males, 17. So a third, believe it or not, Mike, of the Horse of the Year winners have been 3-year-olds. So obviously they also won 3-year-old of the year. Only 5 females have ever won Horse of the Year. Why do you think that is? It's just the classic races are the ones that people pay attention to the most.
Well, I think it's a combination of, for a filly like the Peter Anna, she checks so many boxes. Number one, she has to beat her own grade and age, and she beat every 3-year-old filly. She was 6 for 6 versus 3-year-olds. Then she goes up and challenges the best male horses when she could have won the Alabama by so I got to give McPeek and the connections tremendous credit. You know, she lost to a champion. Fierceness was a 2-year-old champion. He should be 3-year-old co-champion. And then she went out and then she beat older horses. I mean, she ran against older fillies and beat them. So she beat her own crop. She beat the colts. She beat many of the best 3-year-old colts. And then she beat the older fillies. To me, because it's so tough for a filly to do that, it doesn't happen a lot. But I mean, to me, you know, if Fierceness won the Classic, I think it'd be Fierceness and she'd be second by a pretty long way. I mean, to me, even though we beat Torpedo Anna, I couldn't even tell you that Fierceness deserves the vote. He doesn't. He deserves the second place vote, but he doesn't deserve the vote.
Well, I thought this was a fair comparison. I put this together, Mike, and I wanted to ask you, of course, you already talked about your opinion of 3-year-old of the year, Fierceness versus Sierra Leone. Let's just look on the screen here. Both Fierceness and Sierra Leone had 3 wins. Obviously, Sierra Leone's earnings are going to be more because of what happened in the class.
He won a $7 million race.
Yeah, of course. They both won 2 grade, ones. Head to head, they were, 2 and 2 against each other. I gotta be honest, Mike.
I mean, between you and me, Howard, I don't see 2 and 2. I see 2 and 1. Because if a horse comes in 15th and 16th or second and last, like, I mean, what did you get? And yeah, he was second in the Derby, ran a great race. Should have been placed third, by the way. So we won't worry about that. Did he run a better race in the Derby than Fierceness? 10 times better. But if they would have came in 15th and 17th, would be saying 2 and 2. So they both lost. In the races they went head to head that they were winners, it was 2-1. The Jim Dandy, the Travers, and then the Breeders' Cup. That's the way I would view it. But hey, that's me, and that's being subjective. But
well, I've been a Sierra Leone fan and a Fierceness fan, but I've been following Sierra Leone especially since last year. And after the Classic, I was, of course, there at the Breeders' Cup. I turned to one of my good friends. I said, Fierceness just ran the better race. I mean, look, you don't get prized in horse racing for running the better race. And I'm a true blood handicapper, Mike, so I deep dive in all that. And you talked about the pace scenario, but that's why I don't like the head-to-head comparison, because it's not a match race, right? If there's other speed in the race, like the Classic, and Fierceness ran a hole in the wind, yeah, sure, Sierra Leone beat it, but you could definitely argue that Fierceness was the better, or at least the equal of the two. But then you could go back to the Jim Dandy and the Travers and say the pace didn't really develop, and that helped your horse. So I really don't like the head-to-head comparison. I think people should look at other things, to be honest. And obviously, even despite the head-to-head conversation, you feel like Fierceness was better than Sierra Leone in 2024.
I think there's a couple things. One, In the Jim Dandy, Fierceness wasn't on the lead. I mean, you know, he came from behind. In the Travers, he was sitting third. But Peter Anna was on the rail. Sierra Leone at the top of the stretch, you know, at the Travers. I mean, you're the handicapper. How far out was Sierra Leone in the Travers at the top of the stretch?
Yeah, not too far back.
Okay, I mean, you
Yeah,
got a little length of the
no
stretch.
doubt.
You will make it up. So Peter Anna
No
came
doubt.
at us. I mean, you know, listen, to me, Sierra Leone's a great horse, but he's a semi-plotter. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, he's a semi-plotter, and you know, listen, I give him credit, and for me as an owner, we lost the Breeders' Cup Classic. I got it. I don't even. I ran the best. That my horse ran the best race in that race is not even what's killing me. What's actually killing me is the best race of his career was in defeat. You can make a case that second by Fiercest was even more impressive than his Travers and more impressive than the Jim Dandy and even more impressive than the Florida Derby where he won by 13 and a half. For him to do what he did, isn't it like no horse can withstand those fractions and still be there at the end by a length. It was amazing.
Well,
you know?
also, as you mentioned, and people can poo-poo buyers, and you can use the rags, the sheets, whatever you want, and people can say, well, the time doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, Fiercest ran 4 races this year over 100, 3 110 or better. Sierra Leone only did it once, and that was in the Classic.
Against
Obviously,
Fiercest.
Torpedo Anna is not in that conversation, but you can only run against who you're running against. So there's a lot of arguments back and forth, right? People
When you look.
So I think this is an interesting question that I threw at him because should style points matter in horse racing? They matter in the NCAA, right? Football, probably basketball too. They matter in certain sports. Should they matter in horse racing with Horse of the Year, Pete? In other words, obviously Fierceless was more brilliant this year, but he also had some real clunkers. While Sierra Leone was more consistent, but maybe not brilliant. So how do you weigh those factors?
Well, I think everybody's going to weigh it the way everybody has a different opinion, and that's why it's sort of an independent vote in terms of I might look at it and say, I don't care as much about the 15th, and you can see in the chat there's people who are upset about the dismissal of the Derby and who ran where. I might look at it and say the Derby's the Derby. I don't really care that much. And then the third and the Holy Bull was the first start of the year.
Can you read that, Pete? I'm sorry. Can you read what Jeff Amser said at the bottom for our audio listeners?
No, not at all. Mike's dismissal of the result in the Derby is nonsense. They didn't both finish up the track. He finished up the track, and Sierra Leone lost by a nose. See, that's a fair opinion, and the problem is there's no right answer in a lot of this. It's all subjective. It's all opinion based, and people are going to come at it different. Even the people who say the fact of, oh, so-and-so ran the better race. Well, some people could say the one who ran the better race is the one who won the race, and then everything else, nothing else matters. So even that, you can argue who ran the better race, but I might look at it one way. Paul, what do you think? How do you look at that?
Well, Paul, why isn't immersive in the conversation for Horse of the Year? That's one of your girls. She did nothing wrong. She was 3 for 3. She won the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, she's pretty slow on the figs comparatively speaking, but I'm just throwing. I mean, I don't think any of us think immersive should win Horse of the Year, but it's worth the argument in the conversation. What did she do wrong? She was undefeated.
Yeah, well, she'll be the unanimous 2-year-old filly, and she's going to win the Oaks, so she'll have her day in May. But of course, well, yes, because all this stuff matters. Otherwise, all you would need is the PPs and say who won the most races, and then we don't need to argue. We don't need to have opinion. We don't need to look at race flow. We don't. Of course, it all matters. Otherwise, if it's or who had the best buyer of the year, it's a conglomeration. That's probably not the right word, but you got to merge all this stuff together. The issue is where we end up with sometimes controversy is how I look at that, how I calculate that, Professor Kravitz, how I calculate all those variables. This is excellent math talk. How I calculate all those variables can be totally different of how Tom Law calculates them, which could be totally different from how good friend Tim Wilkin calculates them. And it doesn't mean that any of us are wrong. The only thing is we ourselves have to be consistent in how we approach all the different categories. So in other words, I can't say, oh, I'm going to factor in for horse of the year who ran the better race, but then get to sprinter and just say,
Right.
oh, this horse won 4 out of 6. So it's him.
By the way, people you don't need to go to Google those names. Those are voters. Just let people know that Paul rambled off it. All right, we got only about 6 more minutes, guys. I'll just run this in its entirety because we need to move this on. Get your final opinions, then we'll show the Kenny McPeek interview. Here's the end of my great interview with Mike Repole.
Look at it, no matter what forms you look at for the entire year, rags to thorough manager to thoroughbred to buyers, the faster, more talented horse the entire way the whole year is Fierceness. I mean, Fierceness will lose this 3-year-old colt division if you're lazy and just want to say the Classic was the championship. And I don't think the Classic is the Super Bowl. I think when you have when you have like the Classic, in my opinion, even though we beat Torpedo Anna, I'm not saying here she should be horse of the year. Like, I'm actually saying no. She did everything. Her defeat to Fierceness still deserves horse of the year in the same way that Fierceness's defeat to Sierra Leone in the Classic deserves 3-year-old colt of the year. To me, it's the same things. I mean, now this is good, and Howard, this is great debate. I have no idea. I mean, and it sounds like you're a huge Sierra Leone fan, which I think is great. If you got to vote, I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I mean, I'm asking you who you vote for. I wouldn't bother me at all.
It's a really tough call. I think it comes down to how much you value the Classic because, for horse of the year, I tend to agree with you. I think it should be and will be Torpedo Anna, in my opinion. 3-year-old of the year. What's bizarre, Mike, and I don't mean to dodge the question, is that neither Fierceness nor Sierra Leone won a Classic, which is really weird. Now, but I would say this, and I'm sure you're going to.
Travis is pretty close to a Classic, just so you know.
You stole my thunder, man. I was just about to say, with all due respect to the wonderful people in Maryland and the Preakness, man, it's just not the same as it used to be. And I would argue the Travis is more prestigious and a tougher race to win than the Preakness right now in the world that we live in. Would you agree with that statement?
Not only would I agree with it, I'll tell you this: the Travis is more prestigious than the Belmont Stakes. Okay.
Wow.
So especially when it's a 1.5 miles that they'll never run. This year it was 1.25 miles. And I know because I came in second with Mind Frame in that and the Haskell, but that's another story. But to me, the Travers at 1.25 miles, the Derby at 1.25 miles, it's the Midsummer Derby, but the Belmont Stakes nowadays, it's getting watered down. By the time you see anybody in that race, the only person that wants to win the Preakness is the Derby winner. The other horses don't even want to be in the race.
Yeah.
So to me, because horse racing hasn't evolved, to me, it's the Derby, the Travers, the Belmont Stakes, and then maybe I might even go Florida Derby or Bluegrass, and then the Preakness. To be honest with you, nobody wants to win the Preakness, like unless you win the Derby, or you didn't run in the Derby.
Oh, listen, Mike, it's a great debate, and we appreciate your time. I got a few real quick questions not related to horse of the year, and then we'll let you go. Of course, we talked before the show, a good friend of the podcast, Pat Cummings, who you know obviously very well. I know you could go on for an hour about the question on the bottom of the screen, but if you could just pick one thing right now you'd like to improve in horse racing, Mike, what comes to mind is maybe the top priority in your mind?
I think the top priority, and there is a bunch of them, by the way, is thoroughbred aftercare. First of all, I think it's the one that needs the most attention and is also the most fixable, and is also the one that, if you don't agree that we need to do a better job in aftercare, you should be out of racing. Like that's the one. It's not a mare cap. It's not 2-year-old sprinting. It's not HISA. This is, do horses deserve aftercare and a better life after racing? If you don't believe that, then honestly, you shouldn't be in the sport. So to me, it's the one thing that has to be fixed before you even think about fixing anything else. And Pat was just in Arizona, and Pat's done an amazing job. And Howard, to be honest with you, we're working closely with the Jockey Club, which I know sounds, I've been banging heads with somebody there that has stepped down, and I'm very happy about that, by the way. and Jim Gagliano and Pat Cummings are working pretty closely. And I'm telling you, if we can get this ball in the end zone with aftercare, I think we're going to make the sport a lot more credible and do what's right for the sport on something that should have been done probably 20 years ago, if not 30 years ago.
We are big on aftercare. The TRF, the TH of Saratoga. Kim Weir is a friend of mine. If you're familiar with her, does a great job in New York with aftercare. It is so important. And I agree with you. And so if you want to get some interest in aftercare, come back on the podcast and we'll set something up, Mike, or we'll talk off air because we are big fans of aftercare, especially on the show. Last question. And I know you're going to appreciate this question on the bottom of the screen. What impact will Juan Soto have for the New York Mets, man? What a get for Mets fans.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible get, but when you pay someone $765 million, it's not a tough get. Listen, even as a Met fan, and just so you know, I was the underbidder to Steve Cohen with my group on buying the Mets. I got news for you. I will admit that Steve Cohen is a better owner of the Mets than I would have been, because for me, this is insane money when you're almost paying a player, $1 billion, $750 million. So I think it's a game changer, but listen, baseball, a lot of it is pitching. A lot of it is, who gets hot at the right time. And, and the players that play best sometimes in the regular season don't perform in the playoff series. Juan Soto was a guy who was great in the regular season and the playoffs. He really carried the Yankees to where they got. And it's a huge get for the Mets. And in New York, it's +1 for the Mets, -1 for the Yankees. And that -1 is probably better than the +1. So it's exciting.
Well, I'm a Cub fan, and here in Chicago, the Cubs, Sox rivalry. So we understand getting a one-up on the crosstown guys. We appreciate that. Mike, we appreciate you coming on. Again, you're welcome to come on anytime. I want to talk about the new Belmont Park and your focus on turf horses in California and a lot of other things we don't have time for tonight. So please stay on here after we're finished, and we'll talk to you a little bit. Thanks for coming on the HHH Racing Podcast, and good luck in 2025 with Fiercest, Mindframe, and the rest of the crew, man.
Thank you so much, Howard. I appreciate it.
There you go, guys. Mike Repole. I have to. Well, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot.
No,
guys.
that was really well done, Howard. I know a little thing.
I did pay them. I did pay them $25 each too.
No, I'm going to tell you what, Howard, and I could tell you this off here. I know a little bit about interviewing, and just a little. I've done about 10,000 of them, and that was really well done.
Thank you.
I agree. Except for you did dodge the question when he asked it to you.
Well, I watched it back. I'm
the
like,
interviewing part is asking them, Pete. That's all I was.
I know, but when,
Pete, you
when
are
you're also
100% right.
also a tout,
question,
you're supposed to answer. Yes.
let me. First of all, Pete, you're 100% right. But I didn't intentionally dodge it. I really don't know who should win it. I got to be very honest. I would lean and
but he didn't ask. He didn't ask who should win it. He asked who would you vote for. That's different.
Well, okay. I don't know. I'm not sure who I'd vote for.
Yeah, that's the question. That's the answer.
I'm not sure. I would lean to Sierra, and I know people are say, "Oh, of course, Howard's saying Sierra." Here's my main thought, and I hope Mike's going to watch this, and we'd love to have him back. And he was fantastic, and I love everything that he does for the game and etc. So, and he would want me to be honest with my thoughts. The two biggest races of the year, I don't think anyone would argue this, is the Derby and the Classic. He lost both to Sierra Leone. I know there's other races in between. I get it. And what an unbelievable summer Fierce has had. I mean, I have no argument. But guys, again, to me, as a vote, if I were a voter, the two biggest races of the year are the Derby and the Classic. And the fact of the matter is Sierra Leone beat him both those races, and in the Derby, which I know is a weird race, completely handily. We're going to move on in the McPeek interview, but I'll let you guys comment on what I just said, and then we'll move on.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, you're the guy who said don't get too caught up in the head-to-head, and then you just made an argument based on head-to-head.
I could give other reasons too, but you're right.
But that's the one you gave, which is in direct contradiction to your theory about not getting caught up with head-to-head. I think you would be best served by moving on to McPeek.
Well, okay. Sierra Leone never ran a bad race. Fierce's ran two bad races. How about that?
Well, we say bad race is relative.
Yeah.
He never ran a stinker, but he ran bad races in terms of where he was supposed to
What about
win.
the Derby, Pete? The Derby was awful.
No,
What do you
I
mean he
didn't
didn't run
say
a
no,
stinker?
I didn't say he didn't run a stinker. I
Is that what you
said
just said?
Sierra Leone didn't run a stinker, but he ran
Oh,
bad races
oh,
where
you were
there were
speaking of
races
Sierra
where
Leone.
he
Sorry.
should have run better and didn't. So Sierra Leone didn't run a stinker, but who cares? That happens sometimes. Again,
Yeah,
for
but
me, but
Fierceness ran up the track in the Derby and was horrible in the Holy Bowl at 1-5. I'm just saying.
yeah, but I don't know about horrible in the Holy Bull. It was a crap race. It's a prep.
First
It's the
out of
first
the
race of
year.
the year. Yeah, I don't care.
It's-
I don't care about the
Uh,
Holy Bull. Is
well,
more the
you
is
might
more
not,
the
but voters might.
But again, that's the
Anyway,
difference. Like Paul said before, everyone's going to have a list of things. If somebody gave you
of
a
course.
checklist and said, here's all the things you can consider, everyone's going to weight each one of those
Right.
considerations differently.
Right.
And that's the choice. Like, I mean, but if you said, oh, well, Sierra Leone, he kind of stunk in the Belmont. He kind of stunk a little bit in the Travers. He had his race in the Travers. I think Mike made a good point about the Torpedo Anna got to fierceness. Sierra Leone was an unthreatening third, disappointingly, as the favorite, and was the favorite in the Jim Dandy, and was the favorite in the Belmont, and lost all of those. So I'm saying there's all different
Well,
ways to look at it.
but you could say he shouldn't have been favored. I mean, again, we can go on and on, but I look.
That's why
if
I'm saying though he consistently more disappointed, I thought, over the course of the season. It was we joked about it on our handicapping show about how many times did Matt Miller, who's in the chat laughing, how many times did he say, I'm done with Sierra Leone? And of
I
course,
said it too. I said it too. Look,
multiple times in. And why would you say that? Because
And,
he's
and one of you stuck to it.
Paul, I think both you'll appreciate this comment from Noah Maher. If the Holy Bull decides to vote of one over the other, that person shouldn't be voting.
Yeah,
I
didn't
agree
want,
with you. No,
I
I'm
didn't
not
want to
saying
pile on, but
I'm not saying that's
yeah.
a deciding factor. I'm just saying it happened in 2024, and we're looking at the whole year. That's all I'm. But look, if Fierceness wins Three-Year-Old Male of the Year, I will stand. I will cheer. I'll say absolutely deserves it. Great job. It can go either way, guys. I'm just giving people my opinion, and people can take it for what it's worth. All right, guys. Kenny McPeek. Like I said, we're going a little bit longer the show tonight. We appreciate everyone watching, listening. Kenny McPeek, Paul, you were on with me for this interview. Great guy, unbelievable year for Torpedo. Broke news with us, and we were listening very intently yesterday. Of course, it's not really breaking news anymore if you pay attention to the DRF or to Horse Racing Nation or X or whatever. I'm not going to stop this video as much, guys, because there's less controversial things that Kenny McPeek says, but it's a great interview. By the way, if you are enjoying this podcast, please make sure you hit that subscribe button on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, the notification bell on the top right-hand of the screen of YouTube, and please smash that like button. Every time you do that, ladies and gentlemen, it sends people to the HHH Racing Podcast. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And again, very quickly, and we'll get to Kenny McPeek. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. We've got a great tip sheet. Please look below the video player for our information on our Power Picks tip sheet. And Pete has a fantastic website that has been running for a while for our podcast, hhhracingpodcast.com. All right, guys, without further ado, let's just jump in. Again, I'm not going to stop this one as much. Kenny McPeek talked for about 26 minutes. And I'm going to stop it a few times, but not quite as much probably as Repole. We hope everyone enjoys the interview I'm going to bring up right now. This was Paul also joined me for this interview with Mike Repole, which I'm going to bring on right now. Oh, excuse me, with Kenny McPeek, excuse me. And here it comes. And there it is. The sound should be ready to go, roll. Here we go. Kenny McPeek. This was yesterday, Sunday, with Paul and myself talking mainly about his female charge, Torpedo Anna, and her year, and if she should win Horse of the Year. Enjoy, ladies and gentlemen. 2, 1. We are now very happy to be joined by the trainer of Torpedo Anna, Mr. Kenny McPeek. Kenny, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing super, thanks. Yeah, good
Terrific.
evening. Mystic Dan, don't leave the guy out. Rattle and roll.
Quite a few. I love Rattle and Roll.
Yeah.
I've had a winning ticket on Rattle and Roll on many occasions. But Kenny, we're here, of course, tonight to talk about Horse of the Year, and we already talked to Mike Repole of Fierceness Connections in regards to Horse of the Year, and we're also talking about Three-Year-Old Male of the Year as well. But Kenny, we have a few questions for you in regarding to Torpedo Anna, because she just had an unbelievable year. So my first question to you, Kenny, is when did you believe, and everyone around Torpedo Anna believe that she could have a special year in 2024.
Interestingly enough, at the fairgrounds back in February or March, I did a little walking video, and I do a lot of those for clients, and I popped it off to all the people, the ownership, about her. This is going to be champion 3-year-old filly, and she hadn't even started in 2024 yet, but she's always had this vibe and this aura about being ultra special, and what she's accomplished has been over and above what our expectations were. Of course, she was a modestly priced yearling, but it's just been an amazing ride, and just been a real honor to be around quality filly like her. And I thought I would never have a better horse than Take Charge Lady back in early 2000s, and then Swiss Goddiver comes around, and then now this filly. So maybe I have some propensity with fillies, but it's been just a real honor to be around these kind of horses.
Well, she was really, I mean, she had a fantastic year. You see on the screen, you'll see some questions on the bottom of the screen as well, Kenny. But here's her year for 2024 as everyone sees the projections there. Unbelievable. 7 starts, 6 wins, 1 second. It's hard to say that was a blemish, Paul, on her 2024 resume. 3.653 million in earnings. I mean, Paul is really not much to say. It was just incredible. But I know you want to ask Kenny a question on when they realized she might be special, what the plan was for 2024.
Yeah, Kenny, I know typically with horses like this, you tend to maybe map out a campaign going backwards. And I assume with this horse, you might have thought, if you thought she was going to be 3-year-old champion, then you probably thought the distaff might be a good endpoint. Tell me about that, mapping out her campaign and how it went versus how you looked at it maybe going into the year.
Well, the only adjustment really was the Alabama. I mean, that's a race that I had thought about back in early or in the spring, thinking, okay, Kentucky Oaks, and we'll migrate her towards Saratoga, and the Alabama will be a great race to win. And of course, we end up skipping the Alabama for the Travers because she was so dominant over the 3-year-old fillies that not that it didn't make sense to run in the Alabama, but I just thought that the Alabama was going to be a bit of a yawner. The race, the coaching club, the Acorn and the coaching club were yawners. People, I actually remember leaving the track from the coaching club, and people had already left. They didn't even stay to watch the race because she was 2 to 5. And I thought, if I come back in the Alabama, and I discussed it with Naira executives, I said, if I come back in the Alabama, it will be a boring race. I mean, she's fully expected to win that, and we knew she could and would. And I said, but if we run in the Travers, I said, that's kind of next level exciting, gives the world a little bit something to talk about. As Bonnie Raitt would say, let's give them something to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I felt really confident the way she was doing physically that she could actually win the race. And I had the Andy Sterlings of the world. Oh, she's got no shot. Come on, really? This filly rises up to whatever level you need her to rise up to. And she's very workmanlike. And just was really proud to take the shot at that and to try to accomplish something unique. Of course, we did it with Swiss Skydiver years back. And Torpedo, I think, ran a winning race that day. And then beyond that, yeah, we took the conservative route in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, but that was, I think, when you're going into older fillies and mares or older horses, then I thought that was appropriate next step. But it's been a fantastic ride.
Well, before we get to the Travers conversation, can you tell us your feelings going to the Oaks? She only had one race before that. It's actually a question I asked you at the press conference right after the race, and of course, what a celebration that was. But it's not easy to win a race like the Oaks, Kenny, off of only one prep. And you talked about in the press conference why she only had one prep. But what was the feelings of the connections going to the Oaks?
Well, I felt like she was unbeatable. I'd been quoted that week. They better bring a bear because I'm bringing a grizzly.
There you go.
I mean, she was just that sharp and that strong, and she was really going the right direction. And she obviously was dominant performance. And it's I went over there fully expecting to win and was going to be extremely disappointed if she didn't. And so there was a little bit of internal pressure. I'm probably put more pressure on myself when I have a heavy favorite as opposed to, or at least I'm concerned. I don't want to let anybody down. And but she came through. She comes through every time.
Well, we had Mike Repole earlier on this show, and I want to show now. I know maybe watching the stretch run, I don't know how you feel about it. I'll ask you. Watching the stretch run of the Travers, I don't know if you have mixed emotions, if you like seeing it, if you don't like seeing it. But I'll tell you what, Kenny, I thought this was her best race of 2024, her best effort. She certainly ran the best Bayer fig by far of the race, and it's unusual because Mike Repole, Paul and Kenny said that Fierce's best race of the year was also in defeat in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I want to show you what Mike Repole said earlier this evening in regards to the Travers and the effort by your filly Torpedo Anna. I'm going to bring it on the screen. This is about a 25-second clip. I'd love to hear your reactions to it. Let me make it a little bit bigger here on the screen, and we'll watch the race right now, and you're going to hear Mike Repole underneath the sound.
And, right here, when Fierces goes for the lead right here, you're feeling really, really good. And the filly, I give, McPeek and their connections so much credit. I went to the winner's circle and I gave McPeek and the connections, the biggest compliment I can give them is, just please, please, please keep her with the fillies. I don't want to race against her anymore.
Can you confirm that's what he said, Kenny? And that's quite the compliment.
Yeah, no. Look, we embraced after the race. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I hate being second, but it was a great race, and that's what the sport really needed. And Mike's a huge, look, he's got a lot of energy, and he brings a lot to the sport, and certainly investment and passion. And I'm very much like that. I've never worked for him. He and I are, we greet each other regularly, and our families say hello. But he's the kind of guy we need in the game, and I think he respected the fact that we took our shot and made him squirm a little bit there. But that's what horse racing is about: is just trying to do something unique. And we kept her against fillies after that. I'm sure he liked that. But he might see us again next year. We're gonna see if we can get done with her next year. And we might see her against Colts at some point.
Ooh, we'll ask you that at the end. Paul, I know you wanted to ask an important question about should the girls face the boys and how that might affect a horse of the year conversation. Let me ask you guys a question. And obviously, Paul, you know the answer because you heard the interview. Pete, how do you feel about Torpedo Anna in some big-time races against the males going 2 turns? I mean, there's no reason why she can't improve, right? She was only 3 this year.
No, I agree. By the way, I really like Paul's look on that pause there. That you might want to screenshot that and hang that on your wall, Paul. That's a beauty. But I think that's fantastic. I think that's probably part of the reason why you bring a horse like this back, because if she goes and just beats up beats up her same sex and beats up the mares and beats up the fillies, that would be great too. But I assume when you have a horse this talented who has shown that she can run against the top of the market on the boys, who are going to be the same horses that are on the top this year. We're anticipating Fierceness and Sierra Leone to be 2 of the top handicap horses coming into this year. I think it's fantastic. Like he said, I think it's good for the sport. It's good for competition. It's going to raise the level of certain races, and it'll be really fun to watch.
Matt Miller and Paul were sitting together with Kenny at the Breeders' Cup. Paul, can you please read Matt Miller's comment on the bottom of the screen regarding Kenny McPeek, please?
Yes, Matt says, this interview gives you all about 25% of the sense of what Kenny is like in person. Couldn't be a kinder, nicer person. The kind of guy who makes a point of saying your first name to remember it.
I'm sure you would agree with that 1,000%.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've dealt with Kenny a little bit, not a lot, but, a little bit on the back stretch and after races. And Matt was actually physically sitting next to him at the National Turf Riders and Broadcasters Awards dinner, and I know had a great conversation with him. And Yeah, what you see is what you get. I think that's which again, you could say the same thing about Rapoli. What you see is
Noah,
what you get.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Noah definitely likes the UK shirt that
Yes.
Kenny went to UK, by the way, Noah, in case you didn't know. And apparently his wife though went to Louisville. How about that? And they were at the game, Noah. They were both at the game Saturday night. Which who won that game? Oh yeah, the Wildcats. They're the 5th ranked Wildcats, I believe, right now. All right, let's continue out the interview. And in this segment, in about 7 or 8 minutes, I believe, he gives us the breaking news about Torpedo Anna that myself and Paul had absolutely no idea about. In fact, very few people in the world knew about this. Let's continue on with the interview with Kenny McPeek.
Yeah, we're talking about Horse of the Year, Kenny, and I'm wondering, as you thought about the Travers, in addition to, the non-competitiveness, presumably, of the Alabama, was it in your mind at all that, if we have any shot to be Horse of the Year at the end of the year, as a Philly, we probably have to take on the boys at some point?
Well, I actually didn't think about that too much. I mean, I was really more worried about her well-being and how good she was doing before I would run her in any race. But I do think if I had run in the Alabama, she would be 7 for 7 for the year, and you would have a strong case for that too. But I think that the Alabama kind of raised her profile a lot. It made her a bit of an underdog, and I think people like the underdog on occasion. And I think that the energy that the Travers attracted with her being in the race, I think was really good for the sport. And I think you've got to give her credit for that, or maybe even us credit for that. We're kind of thinking out of the box. A lot of people are very conservative in this game and don't want to take a chance. But at the same time, it's it's a unique. It was a unique opportunity, and I'm proud that we took the shot. And I think we probably should be rewarded. I think the fans loved her for
Yeah.
trying.
Well, wouldn't you agree, though, that loss by a nose or head, whatever it was in the Travers, makes a better case for her for Horse of the Year than having won the Alabama by 5?
I don't know. I couldn't even tell you the voting system. I actually have this mindset of I don't worry about anything I can't control. Um, I don't know how they do that. I don't really care. My job's to take really good care of her, and we continue to do that, of course. But would it be an extreme honor? Yeah, I think it would be awesome. Is it up to me? No, it's not up to me. And I do think that there's really only three obvious choices for the award: is fierceness, Sierra Leone, and my filly. And I think I do think that she brought she attracted a lot of energy and publicity, and that's what the sport really needs. And I'd like to think that whoever votes for all that decides that she deserves it. And just proud of the work we did either way.
Well, we're chuckling, Kenny, because that gentleman that just asked you the question is an Eclipse voter, by the way. So
Yeah.
now's your chance to
and
convince him and everyone else that should be
and
Torpedo.
I do, Kenny, think that loss in the Travers
Yeah.
presents more value than an easy win, especially the way it transpired, and especially the horse you lost to. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's invaluable.
Let's talk about Sierra Leone, because he certainly deserves to be in the conversation. And somebody said, oh well, she shouldn't get it over Sierra Leone. Well, they ran against each other, and she beat him. And so I don't know what else she can do. She did what she was supposed to do, and on head and head, she outran him. So something to be said there. But then against fierceness, outruns us by a little bit, and then yet then Sierra Leone outruns fierceness. It's a look. This is high level champagne problems. I mean, these are
Absolutely.
not third world issues. So I'm glad that the discussion's out there, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how it all plays out.
Well, Kenny, I had that discussion with Mike Repole, and I'll give you my personal opinion. I used to believe that head-to-head should matter a lot, but let me give you and everyone watching again, and I talked about this with Mike, the reason why I don't think head-to-head should matter as much. Simply because it's not a match race, right? I mean, it's not. There
Yeah.
are other horses in the race, and your filly, is more a speed type, but is obviously very tactical. Doesn't have to have the lead. But in the case of Fierceness, who's more speed type as well, if there's a very hot pace, that would favor a horse like Sierra Leone. If it was
Right.
a slower pace, in theory, it would help a horse like like Torpedo Anna or Fierceness. So this whole head-to-head conversation, it's good fodder. It's great. I get it. But to me, it should be more about accomplishment, maybe how many grade ones, earnings. I'm not so sure. What do you believe should be the criteria for Horse of the Year?
Well, certainly grade ones. I mean, anytime you knock out 5 grade ones in a year and the head from a 6th one, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the gold standards. Grade ones everywhere. So, yeah.
Well, here's the comparison if you want to talk about it, Kenny.
Right.
Does anything on this, stand out to you? Obviously, to me, it's the grade 1 wins.
Yeah, no, 5 grade ones and 6 out of 7, and yeah, certainly very proud of that. Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about. Actually, I have a comment from Mike Repole, the last one I wanted to show you, because I asked him flat out, who does he think should win Horse of the Year? And your answer, or his answer, I don't know if it's going to surprise people, but we did show this earlier, but you haven't heard this, and neither has Paul, actually. So this is about a 45-second clip of Mike Repole's opinion on who should win Horse of the Year. I think the sound is going to be fine, Paul and Kenny. If you don't hear the sound, give me a thumbs down or something. But let me bring it back on the screen. Here we go. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Here we go.
It's completely unbiased. The Horse of the Year is Torpedo Anna. The Horse of the Year is Torpedo Anna. We'll get nominated. We should be second. And even though we beat her, she was valiant in defeat versus us. And she ran an incredible race. And if it wasn't for Fierceness, she wins the race by 2 or 3 lengths. So if we win the Classic, I think winning the Classic and being her, we become Horse of the Year. I think when we lost the Classic, we lost Horse of the Year to a horse we beat. And this horse only had 1 loss, and it was to Fierceness. And, if I had a vote, I'm voting for Torpedo Anna for Horse of the Year. It's not even, I can't even make a case for Fierceness.
How about that, huh? Well,
No, he's very
Paul,
gracious.
your vote is decided. No problem. If the
Yeah.
guy who owns Fierceness says give it to Kenny and Torpedo Anna, what's the debate?
Well, I got to give him credit.
Yeah.
That's and Kenny said it earlier, and we talked about it, Howard, Thursday night on our last show. Mike can be an acquired taste, and you might not love everything he says, but anyone who does not understand that he's good for the game isn't paying attention,
Yeah,
and that's a good example right there.
Very great,
Kenny,
very gracious of him to say that. Yeah, and he is a sportsman, and yeah, his Colt's fantastic as well, and it's been really fun to just be in the middle of it all.
I'm sure Brooke Smith and Michael Tabor and the connections of Sierra Leone might have a little disagreement with that. But let's talk about the end of the year. The Breeders' Cup was fantastic. She wins the distaff. Paul, I know there was a debate whether she'd actually go to that race or not. Paul.
Well, yeah, Kenny, let me ask you this. There was some talk after the trip. She was not preempted, but nominated to the Classic, correct?
No, she wasn't nominated to the
She wasn't
Classic.
nominated. Okay.
No. We only entered her in the distaff. I mean, I just felt like taking on older fillies looked like it was going to be a pretty tough race, except there were some defections late there,
Yeah.
idiomatic and such. But that was her first race against older fillies, and she, I think you need to jump through that hoop first before you go into older colts. But I could have run her in the Classic, and I felt like she would have been very, very competitive. But I hadn't won a Breeders' Cup race. I had had probably one of the worst Breeders' Cup records in the history of the Breeders' Cup. I was in the money numbers were fantastic. I was like over 50% in first, second, and third, but no firsts. So that was a little bit of a frustration for me, and I really wanted to kind of put that one away. And for me to go to the Classic was, I was going to be a longer price, and in the distaff, I felt like I had just a couple 3 to beat. But that Breeders' Cup win was something that I really wanted to notch that under my belt. Yeah.
I got to ask you. There it is. Wow, that is fantastic. Just arrived. Well, we understand, Kenny, right?
Yeah, last night. So
So I want to ask you guys one more question here, and we'll watch the end of the video. How would have Torpedo Anna done in the Classic, Paul, given the pace and etc., in your honest opinion?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think a lot of that depends on Brian Hernandez. I think ridden the right way, she would have been right in the thick of it.
Pete?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, yeah, if she would have sat close to the pace, it probably wouldn't have ended well. But if he would have been patient with her and sat behind that and just sort of waited and got that first run, then it could have been her that took on fierceness, and then Sierra Leone trying to run both of them down, which would have been fun, really fun to watch. But it's hard to know because you don't know what the horse would have done or what the jockey would have done under those circumstances.
Of course, we didn't know that she had a freaking broken bone in her jaw, Paul, at the time when she ran. So that's a minor problem. All right, let's go ahead and just want to get your guys' opinion on that because I think that's a great question. Let's go ahead and watch the end of the Kenny McPeek interview. Again, thanks everyone for watching. We've got about 8 more minutes of this interview. Thank you. What took him so
I had
long?
been
I mean,
7 seconds in the Breeders' Cup, and I believe 10 thirds. It was the craziest thing. I had horses that went over there and ran well, and we usually did it with horses that were bought for under 100 grand. The Tejano Run was my first. I only gave 20 grand for him, and she's a Devil Do was 30. She ends up third. Both of those ended up third. I mean, I had a lot of horses that just got nosed out, and it was like, oh well, wasn't my day. I had Tiz the Bomb, who actually is the pari-mutuel winner, but then the non-betting horse gets a trophy. I'm like, how'd that happen? But anyway, it's been fun. I remember my losses sometimes more than I do my winners.
Well, it just shows you how hard it is. Sorry, I mean, it took Clement a while, Paul, to win a Breeders' Cup race.
Yeah.
It's just so damn hard. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say that you don't see many Breeders' Cup races won that easily. But you talked about the defections, and how did you envision the race playing out if Idiomatic stayed in the race? Obviously, the way it played out is she led every step of the way. How much different might it have played out as far as race flow, do you think, if she stayed in, Kenny? And were you guys ready to
it would have been a heavyweight battle. I mean, those she would have definitely been giving us our biggest challenge. But you really try. I try not to look back to. I don't worry about things I can't control. I don't try to look backwards and try to predict a race. It never happened. But Idiomatic was definitely the class coming in, and she would have been formidable. And I kind of wish she had run. It would have made the race a little bit more exciting and enticing to watch. But proud of Anna. But let me tell you something that nobody knows. You like that on your podcast, don't you?
We sure do.
Torpedo Anna had a broken bone in her jaw at some point in time over the fall, and it was removed this week. She had a sequestrum where she pulls on the bit so hard that she broke part of her jaw, and the bone had laid in there, and we couldn't get it to heal. And she was running with it. Wow. She was running with it in the cotillion and the distaff.
Oh,
wow. And I mean, for her, she just is oblivious to any pain. And it'd be like you having a root canal and hanging a bit in your mouth, and you got to drag it around there with a rider, and yet she wins anyway. And we were watching it. We kept trying to get it to heal. We couldn't get it to heal. And finally, they had to put her under some sedation, go in there and carve it out. And it's a healing process right now. We gave it a month to try to get it to heal without. We were hoping it would heal on its own, and they ended up doing, of all things, they had to obviously X-ray her, ultrasound her, and CAT scan it to pinpoint where it was, and then carve it out.
When did you discover it, Kenny?
Oh, it'd been fiddling with her. Well, we didn't know it was a sequestrum. We just thought it was just a little cut or an injury, a little nick there. but we couldn't tell what it was until they CAT scanned it and ultrasounded it.
Which was recently?
Yeah, within the last 2 weeks. And
Wow.
here we are, what is it, middle of December, and she's been off since that's it right there.
Wow.
That little piece of bone was up inside right where she grabs the bit.
Wow. Now, do you believe, I mean, obviously she was certainly fit to run and et cetera, but do you think that might have slowed her down a bit? No pun intended, in those 2 races.
Well, I think it made it a little trickier. Well, let's just say it was a small concern. I mean, she never, like I said, she's tough as nails. That's what people can't comprehend, is that she's so tough, but she's, for her to run right through that, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I didn't train her very hard at all going into the cotillion, and she ran, not the fastest race she ever ran, but she gets the W because she's just that good. And then we had to tune her up for the distaff, but we still were watching this thing the whole time, thinking it was just a little mouth issue and that it was going to get better. But to know today that it was a broken bone, actual piece of bone up in there, and it just, for me, it just adds to the notion that she's that special and that she just overcomes about anything. Now,
Well,
here's one the farm took this week. They decided to make her into a Christmas ornament.
We like that. I'll tell you what, if athletes played that, quote unquote, played or ran that well, oh, that's awesome. Look at that. I'll tell you what, if athletes and horses ran that well with broken bone, broken jaws, that'd be quite special. Kenny,
These are
last
pictures
question.
since she had the mouth worked on. So she had the mouth worked on before this picture, but she's at Magdalena, and she is a magnet for fans coming out. We're part of the horse country tours there in Lexington. I own a very historic, unique piece of property, Magdalena, and they've been coming. People come over and over. They take the same tour over and over so they can come see her.
Awesome.
Which is, I love showing off my horses. Even when I won with claimers, I would tell people, "Hey, come on in, check them out." I like doing that for whatever reason. I believe that bringing people in draws energy and positive energy, and it creates fans, and we need more of that. I do think that the sport needs to be more of an open door policy, that trainers are more accessible and jockeys more accessible. I think a lot of people do really try. At the same time, there are those that want to kind of play it close to the vest.
Well, Kenny, one more question. We both agree fully with that statement. Plans for 2025 very quickly, and we'll let you go this evening. Again, we really thank you for coming on. What are Torpedo's plans as of right now for 2025?
Well, we're gonna this little issue that I just mentioned is going to need a couple of weeks to just settle down and heal. I'm not sure that I want to put a bit in her mouth any sooner than after the first of the year. We'll probably fit her out with probably a special rubber bit that takes more pressure off of it so we don't irritate it, and we want to get that thing behind us. But I see her start getting some miles under during the month of January. She'll go to the fairgrounds, my barn there at the fairgrounds in New Orleans, and that's where she prepped all last winter. And then first spot is probably going to be the Apple Blossom. I think that timing wise, that gives me 90 days to get her ready. She has put on maybe more weight than I want. It's all the peppermints that people feed her when they're coming through, but she could come back as a much bigger, stronger, faster filly than you saw last year. I mean, she trained and ran, and she hit every I and crossed every T last year. But can you imagine if she's 75, 100 pounds bigger and stronger? You
might have to change her name from a grizzly bear to I don't know.
Yeah, but can you imagine if we could get her through? I think the La Troyne's another good spot. I haven't studied the New York schedule for 2025, but that's probably where we'll spend most of our time. is looking at the New York races. There's so many of them are so historic and special. But that's off the top of my head. And then at some point, I'd love to think we could, look, if she's dominant against fillies and mares, then we'll consider races like the Whitney or the Jockey Club Gold Cup or even the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think that could be a lot of fun.
Listen, we're very proud of you, proud of the filly, and she's going to have a big 2025. And thanks for breaking that news with us as well, Ken. It's quite amazing. We really appreciate you coming on tonight, Kenny. You're welcome to come on the HHH Racing Podcast anytime. There you go, guys. Our interview with Kenny McPeek. Hope everyone enjoyed that. Our viewership's amazing. I want to say a few quick things, guys. I will let you respond, and then we'll wrap up the show. First of all, we have some major breaking news again, but this is about our own podcast. I'm very proud. We are I mentioned it last week. I teased it. I'll say a little more. I don't want to say the track, but we are in negotiations right now with a major track to bring them extra coverage on their YouTube channel, on their X handle, within their daily racing programs, on track and off track, shows about this particular track and their cards. So we are in negotiations with them with this particular track. And when we're ready to announce that, we will. It should be hopefully by the end of the week, number one. Number two, we did reach out to Brooke Smith of Sierra Leone Connections. He's one of the owners. Didn't get a response back yet, and so that's why we don't have any interviews for Sierra Leone Connections, but I'm sure at some point we will. We did have Chad Brown on a few years ago, but it was not about Sierra Leone. And yeah, those are the two things I wanted to mention. Guys, any thoughts about what Mr. McPeek said, especially how about a Breeders' Cup Classic matchup between him, Fiercest, and Sierra Leone and Mindframe, and who the heck knows, guys? That would be, or even a Whitney appearance, Paul. That would be one heck of a story, right?
Yeah, I think the Whitney is where we want to see it for both, for a lot of reasons, namely that's a race that I'm at every year. And I think, as Kenny maps out the schedule, I would suspect there would be a decent chance as a 4-year-old that he would be inclined to take on the boys before the Classic, and the Whitney is the obvious choice for a lot of reasons. Kenny is shown by his actions and by his words, that he really does try to do what's best for the game, i.e. running the Travers over the Alabama. And certainly the Whitney is the race with the second most significance in the Saratoga meet, as a long history. And I think that would be great. And I would say, if I had a bet right now, I would bet that's going to happen.
Pete, final thoughts.
That would be awesome. I think we're all, as gamblers, as racing fans, as just enthusiasts in general, we're looking forward. And I think we're just happy. I mean, everyone we're talking about tonight, all the horses we're talking about are coming back, which is very rare in this sport, that the top-notch horses come back. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from every discussion that we're having, is the 3 Horse of the Year finalists. I don't even know. I would like to research that. The 3 Horse of the Year finalists coming back to run the year after probably hasn't happened much in the very, very recent history. So I think we should just be thankful as fans, as gamblers, as track goers, as everything, as podcasters. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We're going to have a lot of big races to talk about, and that's very exciting for 2025.
I agree, Pete. Let's just end the show, guys, with a comment from Paul Conlon earlier in the conversations that we showed. And Paul, I really appreciate these kind words. This is for not only myself, but of course, Pete, Paul, everyone involved with the podcast. On the bottom of the screen, Paul Conlon. It has to be said, this show is the embodiment of the HHH Racing Podcast mission statement of bringing together intelligent, passionate, articulate, and humorous characters from across our world, meaning racing world. Paul, thank you very much. That was one of my goals of this podcast from the start. This is not just about, and we've talked about this before, on air, off air. This podcast is not just about who's going to win race 7 at Aqueduct this Saturday. It's got to be bigger and more important than that, because there's a lot more issues in this horse racing world than horses just winning a particular race. Paul Halloran, Pete Visco, appreciate it. Really appreciate everyone watching and listening. I know I went a little bit longer tonight. Hope you enjoyed those interviews with Kenny McPeek and Mike Repole. And we do plan on getting them back, and hopefully in a live podcast setting for them where you can ask them direct questions. Hopefully we'll make that happen in the future. Thanks for everyone watching. We got crossover week this week. We got Pete with not with us. He's going to be with Noah and I think Pat. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're mixing up our co-hosts. So check out our shows. Pacific Horse Players tomorrow night, by the way. Tuesday night, tomorrow night. Bet and Boost and Wednesday night. Picks and Ponies Thursday night. Crush your bets with some McPeek and Mike Repole horses, perhaps. Enjoy. Hope you enjoyed the show. Good luck with your horse of the year and 3-year-old male of the year prediction. Have a great night, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.